They say that power can make a man do terrible things, but what happens when the most powerful alpha in the world throws away his true mate for a crown? This is the story of Alara, a silent, broken Omega, who was rejected by the Alpha King himself. He chose power over her. He chose a political alliance over their destined bond. And when he finally realized what he had lost, it was already too late. This is a tale of rejection, hidden strength, and the cruel lesson that fate teaches those who dare to defy it. So sit back, because this story will take you on an emotional journey you'll never forget. The moon goddess temple stood tall under the silver glow of the full moon, its ancient stones humming with celestial energy that had witnessed countless bonds formed over centuries. Tonight was supposed to be the most sacred night of Alara's life, the night she would be officially bonded to her fated mate, Alpha King Kale Ashford, the most powerful werewolf in the entire realm. But instead of joy filling her heart, instead of the happiness that should have radiated from every fiber of her being, her heart was drowning in an ocean of dread, so deep she could barely breathe. Alara stood at the altar, her small, fragile frame wrapped in a simple white ceremonial gown that seemed to swallow her whole. The fabric was plain, unadorned, nothing like the elaborate dresses worn by high-ranking she-wolves. It was a reflection of her status, invisible, unimportant, easily forgotten. Her long dark hair cascaded over her shoulders in soft waves, and her gray eyes, eyes that once sparkled with innocent hope and dreams of a better future, were now dim with unshed tears that threatened to spill at any moment. Around her, the entire royal pack had gathered in this sacred space. Hundreds upon hundreds of wolves, nobles dressed in their finest silks, warriors in their ceremonial armor, and council members wearing their ancient robes all filled the massive temple, their eyes fixed intently on the elevated stage where the ceremony would take place. But none of them were looking at her with warmth, or kindness, or even basic respect. Most looked at her with pity, the kind of pity you reserve for a wounded animal you know won't survive. Some looked at her with disgust, as if her very presence contaminated the sacred space. And a few, those who had always envied even the smallest bit of attention she received, looked at her with cruel satisfaction, knowing that her humiliation was about to be complete. She was an Omega, the absolute weakest rank in the rigid werewolf hierarchy that governed every aspect of their society. No wolf had emerged for her during her first shift. No strength coursed through her veins like it did for other wolves. No commanding voice that could make others submit. She had been bullied her entire life, pushed around in the orphanage where she grew up, ignored by her own pack members, who saw her as less than nothing, and treated like a ghost, invisible, silent, insignificant. She had scrubbed floors, washed dishes, cleaned the homes of wolves who wouldn't even acknowledge her existence. And now, even her fated mate, the man the moon goddess herself, had chosen specifically for her, the one person in the entire world who was supposed to love her unconditionally, was about to cast her aside like yesterday's garbage. Alpha King Kale stood across from her on the altar, tall and devastatingly handsome, in a way that made every she-wolf in the kingdom weak at the knees. His jet-black hair was tied back in a warrior's knot, emphasizing his strong, masculine features. His sharp jawline was clenched in cold determination, the muscle there twitching slightly, as if he was fighting some internal battle. His golden eyes, eyes that should have softened when they looked at their fated mate, eyes that should have been filled with love and devotion, were instead filled with icy resolve and something else. Something that looked almost like regret, but was quickly buried under layers of duty and ambition. He wore the royal black and gold ceremonial robes that had been worn by Alpha Kings for generations, the intricate embroidery telling the story of his bloodline's victories and conquests. The crown of the Alpha King rested heavy on his head, a brutal reminder of the weight of responsibility he carried. He looked every bit the powerful, untouchable ruler he was destined to be. And Alara? She looked like a fragile flower about to be crushed mercilessly under his boot, a butterfly whose wings were about to be torn off. The high priestess, an ancient she-wolf, whose white hair flowed down to her waist and whose eyes had witnessed centuries of moon goddess ceremonies, raised her wrinkled hands toward the sky. Her voice, strong despite her age, echoed through the silent temple with an authority that came from the goddess herself. By the light of the moon goddess, by the sacred laws that govern our kind, by the ancient bonds that tie souls together across time and space, we gather here tonight to honor the sacred bond between fated mates. This bond, created before birth, written in the stars, blessed by the goddess, is the most precious gift our kind can receive. Alpha King Cale Ashford, ruler of the Ashford Kingdom, protector of our people, descended from the ancient bloodline of warriors and kings, do you accept Ilara Morwen as your mate, your equal partner in all things, your eternal companion, under the watchful eyes of the goddess who created you both for each other? The silence that followed was absolutely deafening, pressing down on everyone present like a physical weight. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive temple. Every wolf held their breath, waiting. Ilara's heart pounded so violently in her chest she thought it might burst right through her ribcage. She thought everyone in the temple could surely hear it, the desperate, terrified beating that matched the countdown to her destruction. She looked up at Cale, her gray eyes meeting his golden ones for just a moment, her gaze silently begging him, pleading with everything she had. Please, please don't do this. We're fated. The goddess herself chose us for each other. Doesn't that mean anything? Don't I mean anything? But Cale's expression didn't change even slightly. His handsome face remained a mask of cold stone, revealing nothing of whatever thoughts or emotions might be churning beneath the surface. His lips curled into a hard, emotionless line. His hands, which should have been reaching for hers, remained clenched at his sides. And then, after what felt like an eternity of soul-crushing silence, he spoke. His voice was deep, powerful, resonating through the temple with the authority of an Alpha King, and devastatingly final. I, Alpha King Cale Ashford, by my authority as King and Alpha, do hereby reject Ilara Morwen as my fated mate. I sever this bond that the moon goddess has placed between us. The words slammed into Ilara like a physical blow from a battering ram. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she gasped audibly, her hand flying to clutch at her chest as the mate bond, that invisible, sacred thread that connected their souls, that linked their hearts, that was supposed to be unbreakable, began to tear apart violently. Pain, blinding, excruciating, soul-crushing pain unlike anything she had ever experienced or imagined possible. It felt like her heart was being physically ripped out of her chest by clawed hands. It felt like every bone in her body was breaking simultaneously. It felt like her very soul was being shredded into a million pieces. Her wolf, the silent, weak presence that had always been too pathetic to emerge during her first shift, howled in absolute agony inside her mind. A sound so heartbreaking it would have made the goddess herself weep. The crowd erupted immediately in shocked whispers that grew into a dull roar. Some wolves gasped, their hands flying to their mouths in horror. Others nodded in approval, their faces showing satisfaction that the natural order was being maintained. Elderly council members stroked their beards thoughtfully, already calculating the political advantages. Young she-wolves who had always desired Cale smiled secretly, hope blooming in their hearts. The rejection of a fated mate was extremely rare, brutally painful to witness, and deeply taboo in their culture. The moon goddess chose mates for a reason, and to reject that divine choice was considered an insult to the goddess herself. But this was the Alpha King making this choice, the most powerful wolf in the realm, and he had his reasons. Reasons that, to him, outweighed even the will of the goddess. Cale's voice rang out again, cutting through the noise, cold and commanding, brooking no argument. I reject this bond in favor of a union that will strengthen and protect our kingdom. I will marry Lady Seraphina of the Silvercrest Pack. Our alliance will bring desperately needed military power, vital resources, and political stability to our people who have suffered through years of conflict and uncertainty. This is my duty as king, my responsibility to thousands of wolves who depend on my leadership. Personal feelings, individual desires, matters of the heart, these things have no place in leadership. A true king sacrifices his own happiness for the greater good of his people. Lady Seraphina stood off to the side of the altar, positioned perfectly to be seen by everyone, and her beauty was absolutely undeniable even by those who hated her. Tall and statuesque, elegant in every movement, with flowing golden hair that caught the moonlight like spun silk and piercing emerald eyes that missed nothing. She was everything Elara was not. Confident where Elara was timid. Strong where Elara was weak. Powerful where Elara was powerless. Connected where Elara was alone. She smiled as she watched Elara crumble, a small, subtle, but unmistakably victorious smile that said she had won, that she had taken what she wanted, that she had defeated her rival without even breaking a sweat. Elara tried desperately to speak, to say something, anything, to beg him to reconsider, to ask him how he could do this, to tell him that she would die without him. But no words came out of her trembling lips. Her voice had always been her greatest weakness, rarely used because no one ever listened when she did speak. She was mute in more ways than one, silenced by her low rank, by her fear of being punished for speaking out of turn, by the crushing pain that was consuming her entire being. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks unchecked as she looked at Kale one last time, really looked at him, trying to memorize his face even as her heart shattered. Why? Why would the moon goddess bind me to someone who sees me as completely worthless? What was the purpose of this cruelty? Kale turned his back on her deliberately, symbolically showing everyone present that she meant nothing to him. Remove her from the temple immediately. This ceremony is over. Prepare for my wedding to Lady Seraphina, which will take place in 1 month's time. 2 massive guards stepped forward from their positions at the side of the temple, their hands gripping Elara's thin arms roughly, their fingers digging into her soft flesh hard enough to leave bruises. She didn't resist their manhandling. She couldn't. Her body was completely numb, her soul shattered into so many pieces she didn't think it could ever be put back together. As they dragged her out of the temple, her feet barely touching the ground, she heard the whispers of the crowd, the cruel comments that followed her like a dark cloud. Poor, pathetic girl. But honestly, what did she expect? An Omega as queen? As Luna? That's absolutely ridiculous. The king made the only right choice possible. Power over sentiment. Logic over emotion. That's true leadership. That's what makes a great ruler. She's nothing. She's nobody. She'll disappear like all the other forgotten Omegas who don't matter. No one will even remember her name in a week. But they were all wrong. Dead wrong. Elara wouldn't disappear. Not forever. The moon goddess had plans for her that no one could have possibly imagined. 3 agonizing days after the rejection ceremony, days during which Elara could barely eat or sleep or even breathe properly, she was summoned to the throne room by royal decree. She walked through the grand halls of the palace one final time, her head bowed down in submission as she had been trained to do her entire life, her body still aching and burning from the severed mate bond that felt like acid coursing through her veins. Every single step felt like walking through flames, like dragging her body across broken glass, like carrying the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. The mate bond rejection didn't just hurt emotionally or mentally. It was a vicious physical torment that attacked every cell in her body, a pain that could last weeks or even months, sometimes driving rejected wolves completely insane or causing them to waste away until death came as a merciful release. The throne room was vast and intimidating, designed specifically to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant before the power of the Alpha King. Massive marble pillars stretched upward toward the impossibly high ceiling that was painted with scenes of ancient battles and glorious victories. Intricate tapestries showing the Ashford family crest hung on the walls, depicting a black wolf with golden eyes beneath a crown. The throne itself carved from solid obsidian stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, sat elevated on a platform of 7 steps, symbolizing the 7 sacred laws of their kind. Kale sat there now, his posture perfectly regal, his expression completely unreadable, his golden eyes cold and distant as they looked down at her from his elevated position. Beside him, positioned deliberately where the queen would normally stand, was Seraphina, her hand resting possessively on the armrest of the throne like she already owned it. She looked at Ilara with barely concealed contempt and disgust, like someone observing an insect they were about to crush beneath their expensive shoe. Kale's voice boomed across the cavernous room with the full force of his alpha authority, making every wolf present instinctively bow their heads in submission. Ilara Morwen, former Omega of the Ashford Pack, you stand before your king to receive judgment. You are hereby banished from the Ashford Kingdom and all territories under my rule. You will leave by dawn tomorrow morning. You are forbidden from ever returning under penalty of immediate death. Do you understand these terms? Ilara's heart, already shattered into countless pieces, somehow managed to break even further. Rejection wasn't enough for him. Severing their sacred bond wasn't enough. Humiliating her in front of the entire kingdom wasn't enough. Now he was casting her out completely, exiling her from the only home she had ever known, sending her into a world where a lone wolf without a pack was essentially a death sentence. Rogues were hunted, killed on sight by most packs, or worse, captured and sold into slavery, or used as entertainment in fighting rings. An Omega alone in the wilderness wouldn't survive a week. Kale continued speaking, his tone flat and emotionless, as if he was reading from a legal document rather than destroying someone's entire existence. You have no rank, no wolf that has manifested, no skills, no purpose here in this kingdom. You are a liability and an embarrassment. Consider this banishment a mercy, because I am being extraordinarily generous. I could have had you executed immediately for the disgrace and humiliation you brought to this royal court simply by being revealed as my fated mate. The council advised execution, but instead I'm giving you your miserable life. Take it and leave. Go far from here, disappear, and never, ever return to darken my kingdom again. Ilara wanted to scream at him, to release all the pain and rage and betrayal that was building up inside her like a volcano about to erupt. She wanted to fall on her knees and beg him to reconsider, to plead for mercy, to ask him if their bond had truly meant nothing at all to him. She wanted to ask him how he could sleep at night, knowing what he had done to his own fated mate. She wanted to tell him that she would rather die than leave, because at least in this kingdom, she could occasionally catch a glimpse of him from afar, could at least breathe the same air as him. But her voice remained trapped inside her throat, locked away by years of abuse and conditioning that taught her that Omega voices didn't matter. All she could do was nod slowly, mechanically, her tears falling silently onto the cold marble floor beneath her feet, each drop representing another piece of her broken heart. Seraphina leaned toward Kale, making sure her voice was loud enough for Ilara and everyone else in the throne room to hear clearly. Honestly, my darling, I'm genuinely surprised you even allowed her to stand in your royal presence this long. She's an embarrassment not just to you, but to the moon goddess herself. What was the goddess thinking, pairing a mighty Alpha King with a pathetic, wolfless Omega? Perhaps the goddess makes mistakes after all. Or perhaps this was a test of your wisdom, and you passed it brilliantly by choosing power and duty over a weak, pointless bond. Kale's jaw tightened slightly at her words, and for just a brief moment, something flickered in his golden eyes, something that might have been doubt or regret or pain. But it vanished so quickly Ilara thought she might have imagined it. He said nothing in response to Seraphina's cruel comments. He simply waved his hand dismissively, the gesture of a king dismissing a servant. Guards, take her away. Ensure she is escorted to the border by dawn. Give her nothing. She leaves with exactly what she brought into this world, nothing. Ilara was thrown out of the kingdom's borders just before dawn broke over the horizon, the guards literally shoving her across the territorial line marked by ancient stones. No supplies were given to her. No money or food, No weapons for protection, not even a cloak to shield her from the cold. Just the thin, white ceremonial dress still on her back, and the shattered pieces of her heart scattered somewhere behind her, in that kingdom that had only ever brought her suffering. She wandered aimlessly into the forbidden forest, a dark, dangerous place, where rogues who had been exiled from their packs formed violent gangs, where wild beasts that even werewolves feared made their dens, and where dark magic was said to linger in the shadows between the ancient trees. Most wolves avoided the forbidden forest at all costs. Stories were told of those who entered and never returned, of screams heard in the night, of bodies found drained of blood or torn apart by unknown creatures. But Alara had absolutely nowhere else to go. No other pack would accept a banished wolf, especially not a weak Omega with no skills or value. She was marked for death now, one way or another. She walked for hours through the dense forest, her feet bleeding as thorns and sharp rocks cut into her soft skin with every step. Her body was weak from 3 days of barely eating, her mind foggy from grief and pain and exhaustion. Tree branches grabbed at her dress like skeletal fingers, tearing the fabric and scratching her arms. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness around her, howls that didn't sound quite like normal wolves, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. She stumbled over roots and fell multiple times, her hands getting cut on rocks as she tried to catch herself. Blood mixed with dirt on her skin. Her dark hair became tangled with leaves and twigs. She looked like a ghost, a broken spirit wandering through purgatory. And then, after walking for what felt like an eternity, her body simply gave up. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the cold forest floor, covered in moss and dead leaves. She lay there barely conscious, her breathing shallow, her vision blurring. Part of her hoped she would just die here peacefully, that her suffering would finally end. What was the point of surviving anyway? She had nothing. She was nothing. Even the moon goddess had abandoned her by giving her a mate who saw her as worthless. But as she lay there hovering between consciousness and oblivion, waiting for death to claim her, something inside her stirred, deep within her chest, in a place she didn't even know existed. Something ancient and powerful began to wake up. It wasn't her weak, pathetic wolf that had never been able to manifest. It was something entirely different, something that had been sleeping, waiting, dormant inside her all these years. It felt like lightning and moonlight and pure raw energy all combined into one overwhelming force. A voice deep and feminine and commanding, a voice that resonated with divine authority, suddenly echoed in her mind with crystal clarity. Child of the moon, precious daughter, you have suffered enough. You have been beaten down, rejected, abandoned, and broken. But your suffering was not meaningless. It was preparation. It was the forging of your spirit in the fires of adversity. You were never meant to be weak. You were never meant to be powerless. The time has come for you to awaken to your true nature. Rise, my child, rise, and claim your birthright. Ilara's eyes shot open wide, suddenly completely alert despite her exhaustion. A blinding white light erupted from her body, surrounding her in a cocoon of pure energy that lit up the dark forest like a second sun had appeared. The light was so bright that birds fled from the trees and small animals scattered in terror. Her bones began to crack and shift, but not with pain, with power. Her skin burned with energy that felt like liquid fire racing through her veins. Her muscles expanded and strengthened. Every cell in her body was being rewritten, transformed, upgraded. And for the first time in her entire pathetic existence, her wolf finally emerged. But it wasn't the weak, insignificant wolf everyone had expected and mocked her for not having. It wasn't a small, timid creature that would barely be able to defend itself. It was a celestial wolf, one of the rarest, most legendary creatures in werewolf history, blessed directly by the moon goddess herself, appearing perhaps once in 1,000 years. Ilara's fur was pure silver that seemed to glow with its own inner light, shimmering and shifting like liquid moonlight. Her eyes burned bright with ancient power and divine energy, swirling with silver and white light. She was absolutely massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, her presence radiating such power that the very air around her seemed to vibrate. She was majestic and beautiful and terrifyingly powerful all at once. Any wolf who saw her would immediately drop to their knees in submission. Elara gasped as the transformation completed, her consciousness merging with her wolf's consciousness, becoming one unified being. She could feel it now, the raw, incredible strength coursing through her veins like an unstoppable river. The power she had been denied and mocked for not having her entire life was finally hers, and it was more magnificent than anything she could have dreamed. Her senses were heightened to an impossible degree. She could hear heartbeats of creatures miles away, could smell scents from across the forest, could see in perfect clarity, even in the darkness. The divine voice spoke again in her mind, warm and loving like a mother speaking to her child. You were never weak, my precious daughter. You were never broken or defective. You were dormant, sleeping, waiting for the right moment. The bond you shared with the Alpha King, the mate bond that seemed like a blessing, was actually suppressing your true nature. His powerful alpha energy was keeping your celestial wolf sealed away, locked down. The moon goddess bound you to him, knowing this rejection would eventually happen, knowing that only through this pain and the severing of that bond would you be freed to become who you were always meant to be. Now that the bond is broken, you are finally free. You are finally whole. You are finally unstoppable. Rise, Elara, and show this world what a true child of the moon can do. Elara stood on 4 powerful legs, her massive silver paws pressing into the earth, her celestial fur shimmering in the dim light filtering through the trees. For the first time in her entire life, she felt strong. She felt alive. She felt like she mattered. She threw her head back and released a howl that echoed through the entire forbidden forest, a sound so powerful and divine that every creature within miles stopped what they were doing and listened in awe. It was the howl of a celestial wolf, a sound that hadn't been heard in this world for centuries. And as the echoes of her howl faded into the distance, Elara made a silent vow to herself, a promise that she would keep no matter what. She would never be anyone's victim again. Never again would she bow her head in submission to those who saw her as weak. Never again would she allow anyone to make her feel worthless. She would rise from these ashes like a phoenix, stronger and more powerful than anyone could imagine. And one day, the Alpha King who rejected her would see exactly what he had lost. 6 months passed since that transformative night in the Forbidden Forest, and Elara was completely unrecognizable from the broken, timid Omega who had been cast out of the kingdom. She trained herself relentlessly every single day in the wilderness, pushing her body and her abilities to their absolute limits. Her celestial wolf gave her extraordinary gifts far beyond any normal werewolf's supernatural strength that allowed her to tear through solid stone, incredible speed that made her faster than the eye could follow, advanced healing powers that could close wounds in seconds, and most remarkably, the ability to heal others and even communicate with the moon goddess herself through meditation and prayer. She learned to hunt with deadly efficiency, bringing down prey 3 times her size. She learned to fight using not just her wolf form but also her human form, practicing combat techniques for hours until her muscles screamed. She learned to survive on nothing, to track anything, to disappear like a ghost when she wanted to. She was no longer the broken, pathetic Omega who begged for scraps of kindness and affection. She was a force of nature, a divine instrument of the moon goddess, a warrior unlike any the world had seen. But Elara didn't use her newfound power for revenge or destruction, as many might have expected. Instead, she dedicated herself to helping those who couldn't help themselves, to protecting the weak and punished the wicked. She became a guardian of the forgotten, a protector of the powerless. She moved through the territories like a silver shadow, appearing wherever she was needed most. When she discovered rogue traffickers who kidnapped Omega children to sell them into slavery, she slaughtered every single one of them without mercy, freeing dozens of terrified children and personally escorting them to safe packs that would take them in. When she encountered corrupt pack leaders who abused their power and tortured their pack members, she challenged them to combat and destroyed them, installing better leaders in their place. When she found injured wolves left to die by their packs, she healed them with her celestial powers and gave them hope. Rumors began to spread like wildfire throughout all the werewolf kingdoms, whispered stories that grew more elaborate with each telling. Tales of a mysterious silver wolf who moved like a phantom through the forests and appeared like an avenging angel when needed most. A wolf whose very presence radiated divine power so intense that alphas submitted without question. A wolf who glowed with ethereal moonlight and whose eyes held the wisdom of ancients. Some said she was a spirit sent by the moon goddess herself. Others claimed she was a myth, a legend that desperate wolves told themselves for comfort. But those who had actually seen her, those who had been saved by her, they knew the truth. She was real. She was powerful. She was merciful to the innocent and ruthless to the guilty. No one knew it was Alara, the rejected Omega that everyone had forgotten, the girl whose name had been erased from the Ashford Kingdom's records as if she had never existed at all. The pathetic, weak, wolfless girl that had been thrown away like garbage was now the most talked about legend in the werewolf world. Meanwhile, back in the Ashford Kingdom, Alpha King Kale was slowly descending into his own personal hell. His marriage to Seraphina had taken place exactly 1 month after the rejection ceremony, a grand political affair with thousands of guests from allied packs. It should have been the beginning of a powerful new era for his kingdom. The alliance with Silvercrest had indeed brought military strength and resources, just as planned. On paper, everything was perfect. He had done his duty as king. He had made the logical choice. But something was desperately, horribly wrong. From the moment the mate bond with Alara was completely severed, Kale began experiencing symptoms he couldn't explain or ignore. Constant physical pain that no healer could cure, as if his body was rejecting his own choices. Nightmares every single night where he saw Alara's gray eyes looking at him with betrayal and tears. An emptiness in his chest that grew larger every day. A void that nothing could fill no matter how hard he tried. His wolf, once strong and proud, became restless and aggressive, constantly fighting him for control, howling mournfully inside his mind at all hours. Food tasted like ash in his mouth. Colors seemed duller, less vibrant. Nothing brought him joy anymore, not even the victories and successes his kingdom achieved. And Seraphina, the woman he had chosen over his fated mate, revealed her true nature once the wedding was complete. She was cruel, manipulative, power-hungry, and unfaithful. She treated servants worse than animals. She conspired with council members behind his back. He even discovered she was having affairs with multiple warriors in his own pack. The woman he thought would be a strong queen was actually a poison destroying his kingdom from within. 3 months after the rejection, Kael made a decision that shocked everyone. He had his marriage to Seraphina annulled and her banished from the kingdom for treason and adultery. The political alliance was damaged, but not completely destroyed. But more importantly, Kael finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Ilara was his true mate. The moon goddess didn't make mistakes. He had rejected the one person in the entire world who was made specifically for him, who would have loved him unconditionally, who would have been loyal and true. He had thrown away something infinitely precious for temporary political gain, and now she was gone, probably dead in the forbidden forest, killed by rogues or beasts or simple starvation because of him, because of his pride and his ambition and his stupidity. The guilt and regret consumed him like a disease. He ordered search parties into the forbidden forest, offering enormous rewards for any information about Ilara. He personally led expeditions, searching desperately for any trace of her, but they found nothing. No body, no scent trail, nothing. It was as if she had vanished from the world completely, until the rumors reached him. Rumors of a silver celestial wolf. Rumors that made his heart nearly stop beating. Could it be? Was it possible that Elara had not only survived but somehow awakened as a celestial wolf? The timing matched, the location was right, and something deep in his soul, some remnant of their severed bond, told him it was true. Kael became obsessed with finding the silver wolf, with finding Elara. He needed to see her. He needed to apologize. He needed to beg for forgiveness even though he knew he didn't deserve it. He needed to tell her that he had been wrong, so terribly wrong about everything. But the silver wolf was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing without pattern or warning. And even when his scouts got close, she vanished before they could make contact. It was as if she was deliberately avoiding the Ashford kingdom and anyone connected to it. Kael didn't know if she even knew he was searching for her. He didn't know if she would ever forgive him. He didn't know if the damage he had caused could ever be repaired. All he knew was that he had rejected his fated mate for power and ambition, and now, when it was possibly too late, he had finally learned the devastating truth of what he had actually lost. Not just a mate, not just a bond. He had lost the other half of his soul, his perfect match, the one person who could have made him truly complete. And that loss was destroying him from the inside out. The Alpha King who had everything was now the most miserable wolf in the entire kingdom. And somewhere out in the world, the Omega he had thrown away was now more powerful than he could have ever imagined, living a life where she no longer needed him at all. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony.